The film begins with three women, all age 30, but living very different lives. At that time, Man Ni, a top student who graduated from the country's best university, started a fireworks company with her husband, Huan Shan. Even though she has a degree in business intelligence, she chose to be a full-time housewife after getting pregnant with their son, Jingwei. All her life, Man Ni doesn't do things halfway. She wakes up before dawn, runs, does Pilates, and then makes breakfast for Huan Shan and their little boy. On that day, they are moving from their old apartment to a bigger one. Man Ni believes this new home will bring better luck and a good school for Jingwei. She carefully arranges the furniture, thinking that it might help her husband's business and bring more fortune. At the same time, Gu Jiao wakes up in her rented apartment, buys breakfast from a street vendor, and takes public transport to work. She works as a senior sales associate at Mill, a luxury clothing brand. Gu Jia is hardworking and attentive, which makes customers like her and most of her co-workers too. Then there's Xiao Qin, a cheerful woman with a baby face. She doesn't have kids and lives in a simple apartment with her husband, Xiao Yang, their cat, and his pet fish. She works at a dull job in a property management office, but her personality is as bright as her looks. She's always ready to help with a smile. That day, a new co-worker, Zhao, joins the office and Xiao Qin starts to notice him. On the other hand, Huan Shan got a sudden call from work and Man Ni followed him to the office. While there, she noticed a female staff member giving Huan Shan a tangerine. Instead of feeling jealous, Man Ni went straight to the supermarket and bought a whole box of tangerines to bring home. Meanwhile, at Mill, a simply dressed woman entered the store, but no one paid attention to her except Gu Jia, who treated her like any other customer. To Gu Jia's surprise, this woman wasn't just browsing cause she was ready to spend a lot of money on a special diamond necklace. At that time, Gu Jia got really excited because this could be her chance to get a promotion. She told Miss Chun, the mysterious woman, that she needed to pay in full for the necklace, and Miss Chun agreed. Gu Jia was so happy, she almost ran to tell the store manager. But before she could, her work rival, Jing Yu, arrived with snacks and drinks for Miss Chun, hoping to steal the sale. The manager stopped Jing Yu, but tried to get involved by offering to exchange phone numbers. Luckily, Miss Chun insisted on dealing only with Gu Jia. Everyone congratulated Gu Jia, except Jing Yu, who secretly stole Miss Chin's phone number from Gu Jia's phone when she wasn't looking. That night, the store realized a pair of pants was missing. All the staff had to stay late to check the inventory, but they couldn't find the pants. They were told they'd have to pay for it, which was almost equal to a month's salary. Exhausted, Gu Jia finally went home and had dinner from a convenience store. Meanwhile, Man Ni enjoyed a fancy family dinner in their new apartment, with a great view of the city. Huan Shan noticed the pile of tangerines and told her she was the perfect wife. At the same time, Xiao Qin wasn't so happy. She was pretty sure her smelly husband cared more about his old fish than his new wife. There, Man Ni wanted Jingwei to get into an elite kindergarten in their new building, so the whole family had to go for an interview, including the parents. The admissions team was impressed with Man Ni and Huan Shan because they were well-educated and dedicated parents. Jingwei did well in the interview until the teacher asked him about the capital city. Instead of answering, Jingwei kept saying, "On the arm." When the teacher repeated the question, Jingwei bit his arm. Man Ni wasn't mad when she heard this. Instead, she told Jingwei that even though he did his best, he shouldn't bite people. And Xiao Qin, who was Man Ni's best friend and Jingwei's godmother, came to check on them. Since Xiao Qin worked for the building's management, Man Ni asked her to find someone important in the building who could help get Jingwei into the school. It turned out to be Mrs. Wang. Man Ni admitted to Xiao Qin that she had basically forced Huan Shan to move there for Jingwei's education, so this plan couldn't fail. Meanwhile, Gu Jia got a call from her mom, who had a big surprise for her. Her mom had saved all the money Gu Jia sent her and wanted her to move back home. She also reminded Gu Jia about her promise to come home if she turned 30 without a husband or a house. Gu Jia's 30th birthday was coming soon, and she was still single and living in a rented apartment. After the call, Gu Jia felt confused and wondered if she had made the wrong choices in life. At work, Gu Jia noticed a rash on her face, but she didn't want to miss her meeting with Miss Chun. Her co-workers almost forced her to go to the hospital, where she found out she was allergic to peaches, even though she hadn't eaten any. Looking at her lip balm, Gu Jiao realized someone had tampered with it, and she knew exactly it was Jingyu. Soon after, Gu Jiao texted Miss Chun to reschedule and went back to confront Jingyu. She splashed water on Jingyu's face and warned her not to cheat again. At the same time, Xiao Qin took her cat to her parents' house after it killed 2 of Xiao Yang's pet fish. While she was there, her mom kept pressuring her to have a baby soon. Xiao Qin explained that Xiao Yang planned to wait 5 years before having kids. But suddenly, Xiao Qin realized she was late. A pregnancy test confirmed it, and now Xiao Qin was panicking, trying to figure out how to tell her fish-obsessed husband that she was pregnant. On the other side, Man Ni was trying to have some fun. She went to Mrs. Wang's penthouse, bringing a cake, hoping to win over the rich woman's heart. Mrs. Wang was wealthy, annoying, and very clueless. She even thought Monet's water lilies was painted by Van Gogh. After spending the whole day trying to get close to Mrs. Wang, Man Ni still wasn't sure if the woman would help her. When she got home, Man Ni vented to Huan Shan, feeling the pressure of trying to climb the social ladder. The next day, Gu Jia had an interview for a store manager position, but was told she needed to bring something unique to the brand. After the meeting, Gu Jia felt pain and almost fell, but she insisted she was fine. Meanwhile, Xiao Qin and Zhao, the lowest-ranking workers in the office, were asked to deliver packages around the building. Zhao paid a delivery person to do the job, but Xiao Qin didn't have money because she wasn't handling her own finances. Unable to reach anyone, Xiao Qin decided to climb 9 flights of stairs by herself. At that moment, Gu Jia, who was also delivering clothes to a customer, saw Xiao Qin and gave her some money so she could hire a delivery person. At that moment, Man Ni took the chance to get closer to Mrs. Wang by helping her walk down the stairs in high heels when the elevator was broken. She even let Mrs. Wang wear her sandals, while Man Ni walked in just her socks. Xiao Qin saw how hard Man Ni was trying to impress Mrs. Wang and felt bad, wishing she could do more to help. That night, Gu Jia came home feeling really sick. Her mom, sensing something was wrong, called an ambulance to help Gu Jia. When Gu Jia woke up in the hospital, the doctor told her she had acute nephritis. Thankfully, it was a mild case and could be treated. Gu Jia was confused about how she ended up there, but her mom called, sounding panicked, and explained that she was so worried that she had to call the ambulance to save her. Gu Jia's mom wanted to come to the city right away to take care of her, but Gu Jia calmly reassured her and firmly asked her not to come. Meanwhile, at home, Man Ni asked Huan Shan to help her set up a telescope. Mrs. Wang had already won it, but didn't know how to use it, and Man Ni thought showing her would score some extra points with the rich woman. The next day, Xiao Qin went to the doctor with Man Ni to confirm her pregnancy. After finding out she was really pregnant, Xiao Qin felt nervous, worried that Xiao Yang would be upset. But Man Ni encouraged her. She told Xiao Qin that it was her body, her baby, and her life. She suggested that Xiao Qin shouldn't stress about what Xiao Yang thought and should focus on what she wanted. That night, Xiao Yang came home and started complaining about Xiao Qin's parents still coming over to cook and clean, calling Xiao Qin a baby even though she's an adult. Feeling upset, Xiao Qin ate dinner alone, while Xiao Yang just gathered his clothes for laundry. When Xiao Qin showed Xiao Yang the pregnancy test, Xiao Yang asked her not to keep the baby. Hearing this, Xiao Qin felt hurt and replied that they should go to the hospital tomorrow to take care of everything. Xiao Yang was confused and didn't know what to say, so he awkwardly gave her a gift from his business trip. Xiao Qin, already fed up, barely glanced at the gift. At Mrs. Wang's house, Man Ni was helping with the telescope. Mrs. Wang shared her wish to name some asteroids after her son as a gift for his adulthood. She asked for Man Ni's help to figure out how to do this without worrying about the cost, hoping it might also help Jing Wei get into the kindergarten. Man Ni, tired of Mrs. Wang's nonsense, politely declined and reminded her that the painting Water Lilies, which Mrs. Wang liked, was by Monet, not Van Gogh. She firmly said that money can't buy class or art knowledge. Mrs. Wang looked surprised and maybe a little impressed, then told Man Ni that she reminded her of her own son. Mrs. Wang shared a story about her son feeling jealous of a classmate whose trophy was named after an asteroid, while both of his parents were scientists. She then offered to buy a star for her son, but he just looked at her with disgust. For a moment, Man Ni felt a wave of unexpected sympathy from Mrs. Wang, realizing that even rich people face problems too. The next day, Xiaoyang took Xiao Qin to the hospital to take care of some things. But when they arrived, Xiaoyang suddenly panicked, saying he had a work emergency. He rushed over to Man Ni's house to seek advice. Man Ni explained that becoming a mother means your whole life will change. She stressed that Xiao Qin wouldn't just be herself anymore cause she would become a mother, and everything would start revolving around the baby. Meanwhile, Gu Jia was forced to go on a blind date arranged by her mom with a man named Zhong Ji, who claimed to be a managing director. Soon after, Zhong Ji invited her to dinner, but it turned out to be a boring networking event where he pretended to know a lot of people, though no one really cared. His cheap suit stood out in a bad way, and worse, he introduced Gu Jia as his girlfriend and made her act as his personal photographer. After that embarrassing moment, Gu Jia immediately blocked him. Her coworkers called her picky, but Gu Jia felt like she just had standards. Moments later, Man Ni met with Mrs. Wang to share information about naming asteroids. They felt connected when Man Ni admitted she now understood the topic a little better. Even billionaires, it seemed, needed a break sometimes. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chen stopped by the mall to buy jewelry and shared her latest news with Gu Jia. She had been spending her divorce money in a very extravagant way. Mrs. Chen and her ex-husband had built their wealth together, but once they became rich, her ex showed up with a girlfriend who wore designer clothes. In the end, Mrs. Chen decided that if anyone should be wearing expensive things, it should be her. Gu Jia felt a bit guilty using Mrs. Chen's money, but she still went ahead and used her credit card. That night, Huan Shan was working late, and Luo Yin, known as the Tangerine Girl, came by again with homemade food and a dramatic story about how hard her job was, complete with fake tears. Huan Shan told Man Ni about the situation like it was no big deal, but Man Ni knew what was really going on. The next day, Man Ni went to the office with a big pile of tangerines for everyone. She handed one to Luo Yin with a smile. Then, she casually told Luo Yin to focus on her work if she wanted to get ahead. Moments later, Xiaoyang and Xiao Qin had lunch with Man Ni and Huan Shan. Xiao Qin hoped that seeing cute little Jing Wei would change Xiaoyang's mind about having kids. However, Xiaoyang was more interested in their aquarium. Xiao Qin felt disappointed as she watched Man Ni and Huan Shan share love and responsibility, while Xiaoyang remained clueless. On the way home, they argued. Xiao Qin wanted a happy, loving family like Man Ni's, but Xiaoyang just wanted to stay the same. On the other hand, Zhang Ji showed up at the mall with his girlfriend and tried to insult Gu Jia, bragging that he was hard to reach because she was just a salesperson. But Gu Jia got the last laugh by selling a lot of clothes to his girlfriend, making Zhang Ji's wallet cry. The next day, Xiaoyang and Chen Su found out about Xiao Qin's pregnancy and told her mom, hoping they could get a little extra pocket money. Meanwhile, Man Ni and Huan Shan visited Mrs. Wang to talk about getting Jing Wei into preschool. They also had to fund the annual fireworks show, which annoyed Huan Shan because it seemed pointless. But Man Ni kept her cool and managed to make a good deal. On Jing Wei's first day of school, Man Ni met Jenny, who was known as the queen of the school. Jenny scolded Man Ni for not bringing homemade cupcakes, which seemed to be a tradition for new students. There, Man Ni quickly charmed Jenny and promised to bring some before lunch. However, when Jenny found out that Man Ni lived in a fancy neighborhood, her attitude changed completely. She immediately added Man Ni to the parents' group chat, one with the teachers and another one without. The drama started when Man Ni came back with perfect cupcakes, impressing Jenny. However, things got complicated during the school food festival when a classmate, Shinji, had a seizure. Jenny took this moment to convince other parents to push Shinji out of school, saying he was a bad influence. Man Ni and Huan Shan were disgusted by Jenny's discrimination. Even though both she and Jing Wei were scared, Man Ni believed they should help Shinji, not avoid him. She explained to Jing Wei that Shinji's seizures were only dangerous to him and that treating him unfairly was wrong. In the end, Man Ni stood up to Jenny and defended Shinji's family, gaining support from other parents. Thanks to Man Ni, Shinji didn't have to leave the school. The next day, Chen Su told Xiaoyang and Xiao Qin that their mom now knew about Xiao Qin's pregnancy. The situation became more complicated because their grandma would not take it well if anything happened to the baby. And Jenny, as usual, attacked Man Ni at school, calling her a low IQ housewife and threatening to make Jing Wei's life difficult at school. Man Ni chose to ignore Jenny's silly talk, but then the principal called Man Ni in and invited her to join the school team. This made Jenny feel threatened and worried that Man Ni would steal her spotlight. Back at Mill, a middle-aged man bought a lot of clothes and then asked Gu Jia out, handing over his loyalty points receipt, thinking it would impress her. But Gu Jia politely declined and pointed out that he had a wedding ring in his pocket. The man left angrily, but Gu Jia didn't care and went right back to work. Man Ni bought 2 tennis tickets for Xiao Qin and Xiao Yang, hoping this would help improve their relationship. However, during the match, Xiao Yang got a work call and left. This was typical of Xiao Yang. Soon after, Xiao Qin went home alone but couldn't get inside because the door was still stuck. She had told Xiao Yang 1,000 times to fix it. She tried calling him, but there was no answer. With no other choice, she sat outside, upset. When Xiao Yang finally showed up, it was late, and Xiao Qin was furious. They argued about Xiao Yang's usual lack of attention, and then Xiao Qin mentioned the baby. This time, Xiao Yang opened up. He shared that his father left him and Chun Su when they were kids, making him grow up too fast. Xiao Yang admitted he was scared he wouldn't be a good father. Meanwhile, Huan Shan came home drunk after meeting with Mr. Wan, their big client. Shortly after, Man Ni called Chun Su to get details about the meeting and figured out that Huan Shan had brought Luo Yan with him. Now that Xiao Qin's mom knew about the pregnancy, thanks to Xiao Yang's mom, she was overjoyed and immediately took Xiao Qin to a doctor's appointment. The whole family, including Xiao Yang, cheered when they saw the ultrasound picture. That night, Xiao Qin and her mom went shopping for baby supplies, while Xiao Yang complained that their house was too small for all the new stuff. But secretly, Xiao Yang stayed up late to prepare space for the baby's crib. At Mill, Gu Jia faced a big problem when a $2,000 loyalty point receipt was found on her account, which was a serious violation for staff. Gu Jia insisted she didn't take it, but the evidence said otherwise. She realized it was the same receipt the strange customer had tried to give her a few days earlier. At that time, Gu Jia tracked down the customer and begged him to admit the truth, but he just laughed and said maybe Gu Jia took it after he left. In desperation, Gu Jia asked her boss for help, but he refused and reminded her that she was just a sales girl and customers came for the brand, not for her. Later, Man Ni found out that Huan Shan had a fight with Mr. Wan, their biggest client. At that time, Huan Shan didn't want to deal with Wan anymore, calling him a cheapskate who didn't appreciate their fancy fireworks shows and kept pushing for cheaper products. Wan also forced Huan Shan and Luo Yan to drink until they couldn't stand. Huan Shan wanted to cancel the contract, and Man Ni, knowing they needed Wan's business, offered to negotiate. Even though Huan Shan refused, Man Ni went to meet Wan anyway. However, Wan tried to overpower her by making her drink and acting inappropriately. Furious, Man Ni cursed at Wan and left. Shortly after, Man Ni came home drunk and heard from the housemaid that Jing Wei had been taken to Jenny's kid's birthday party. It had been mentioned in the group chat, but Man Ni was too busy and drunk to notice. She rushed to Jenny's house and found Jing Wei locked in a room, screaming and crying. Angry but calm, Man Ni comforted Jing Wei, then dragged Jenny and her friends into the same room to teach them a lesson. When Jenny threatened to sue, Man Ni calmly replied that she had evidence of Jenny kidnapping Jing Wei and stealing money from the school. Shortly after, Man Ni took her son home, and it was the first time in 30 years she had acted like that. That night, Huan Shan came home after playing soccer with his friends. Man Ni didn't say a word about her crazy day. She just told Huan Shan that since they decided to cut ties with Mr. Wan, they might face tough times and may even need to sell their new house. The next day, Gu Jia almost got into serious trouble at the company headquarters, but Xiao Qin, who happened to be there for something else, overheard Zhao talking about Gu Jia's problem. Then, Xiao Qin remembered hearing a woman at the mall using the loyalty receipt in Gu Jia's name. Xiao Qin quickly stepped in to help and managed to clear Gu Jia's name. After checking the mall's CCTV footage, they found the real culprit, one of Jing Yu's friends. Even after getting caught, Jing Yu didn't feel sorry and said that Gu Jia was just lucky and didn't deserve her success. When the manager asked Gu Jia how she wanted to handle the situation, Gu Jia requested that Jing Yu be fired, just like what would have happened to her. Xiao Yang started stepping up as a dad by paying more attention to Xiao Qin. As a thank you, Gu Jia invited Xiao Qin to dinner, and Xiao Qin insisted on paying back the 200 yuan she owed. During dinner, they bonded over being the same age and finally became friends. There, Chen Su told Man Ni about the trouble caused by Luo Yin, who pushed Wan Shan during his drunken night. Realizing that Luo Yin had been a problem from the start, Man Ni decided to fire her without hesitation. Determined to save their company, Man Ni jumped back into the business. She attended a meeting with wealthy women alongside Mrs. Wang, but felt out of place as everyone showed off their branded bags. One of the women at the event even owned several amusement parks, and Man Ni thought that becoming friends with her could bring a big business deal for their company. At the end of the event, they took a group photo, but when the picture was posted online, Man Ni was cropped out of it. Even so, Man Ni didn't give up easily. She decided that the first step to entering the elite circle was to have a branded bag of her own. Then, she heard that Jenny's family was leaving the school, which meant the chairperson position would be open. Man Ni saw this as a great opportunity. She contacted Gu Jia and Xiao Qin to help her get a branded bag. Luckily, Gu Jia had a friend who could assist, and although it wasn't easy, she managed to help Man Ni get the bag. Meanwhile, Xiao Qin and Xiao Yang faced another challenge. Xiao Qin was offered a promotion, but turned it down, worrying that the extra workload might affect her pregnancy. Xiao Yang, stressed about possibly losing his job, got upset with Xiao Qin for rejecting the promotion. They weren't the only ones feeling financial pressure, as Gu Jia's landlord raised the rent because of inflation, and Man Ni struggled to justify spending more than $40,000 on a branded bag, especially since their house was already mortgaged to save their company. But then, Man Ni convinced Wan Shan that buying the branded bag was just the first step to joining the wealthy women's circle, which could help their business, especially since one of the women, Mrs. Li, owned 3 amusement parks. Wan Shan agreed and tried to borrow enough money from Man Ni to buy the bag. Finally, Gu Jia delivered the bag to Man Ni, who explained how important it was for her family's future and even called it a lifeline. With the branded bag in hand, Man Ni successfully joined the rich women's group. Since that day, Man Ni, Gu Jia, and Xiao Qin started hanging out more often. Gu Jia's company rewarded her hard work with a European cruise trip. Then, she asked Man Ni for advice, and Man Ni suggested upgrading to a suite, saying the experience would be much better. Gu Jia felt inspired, while Xiao Qin felt a little sad because her pregnancy made it hard for her to travel. At that time, Gu Jia was excited for her trip, believing it would be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. While shopping for clothes, she realized that as she got older, she cared more about quality than brands or trends. Man Ni also lent her some of her best dresses for the trip. Shortly after, Xiao Qin and Xiao Yang received terrible news that Xiao Qin had a miscarriage. She was devastated and couldn't believe it. She felt even worse when she saw Xiao Yang's reaction, as he seemed not to care. She began to wonder if Xiao Yang was secretly relieved because they no longer had to worry about having a child. Meanwhile, Man Ni realized that Mrs. Wang had been treating her like a maid, asking her to bake cakes for the other women while they chatted. After the guests left, Man Ni gave Mrs. Wang a valuable lesson, telling her that her talent for baking should be appreciated and that she could help Mrs. Wang gain respect from the other women. Mrs. Wang stayed silent, but she knew Man Ni was serious. Finally, the day of Gu Jia's cruise arrived. She smiled wide until she saw her small, not-so-luxurious room. The ship's restaurant was also divided into economy and luxury classes. Gu Jia went to the luxury restaurant and asked for a window seat, but the waiter told her that those seats were reserved for people who booked earlier. That night, Man Ni visited Xiao Qin to comfort her after hearing the sad news from Xiao Yang. That night, Gu Jia wore a beautiful dress that Man Ni had lent her and went to a bar for a drink. She ordered whiskey, but it was too strong, and she almost choked. A man at the bar noticed and sat next to her, joking that Scottish whiskey might be too much for her and ordered Japanese whiskey instead. The man told her a strange story about an island in Greece, where they wash human bones with Scottish whiskey during a ceremony after someone has been buried for 3 years. Gu Jia laughed, thinking he would have told the story no matter what they were drinking, but it made her smile. They talked by the railing, and Gu Jia seemed to enjoy his company. It turned out that the man had noticed Gu Jia eating alone in the restaurant earlier. His name was Xing, and he offered to upgrade Gu Jia's room to a suite, but Gu Jia politely declined and decided to upgrade it herself. The next day, Man Ni and Huan Shan's company was having financial trouble, and they had to let go of 2 longtime employees. A friend heard about their situation and lent them some money. Huan Shan was upset, but Man Ni reassured him that she would secure a big order from Mrs. Li's family. When Man Ni found out that the rich moms were sending their kids for horse riding lessons, she sold some of her designer items to pay for Jing Wei's lessons, hoping to get closer to Mrs. Li. On the other hand, Xiao Qin and Xiao Yang went for checkups to find out why she had a miscarriage. Xiao Qin's mom came to stay with him for a while to take care of her, and even brought Xiao Qin's cat to cheer her up. At that time, Xiao Yang felt uncomfortable with his mother-in-law staying, but this time, Xiao Qin stood her ground. The following day, Gu Jia woke up in her suite feeling refreshed, even though the upgrade cost nearly $3,000, and she decided to deal with that later. Meanwhile, Man Ni met Mrs. Li at the horse riding school. Thanks to Mrs. Wang, Man Ni learned that Mrs. Li was the second wife of her wealthy husband. Even though Mrs. Li was rich, she had a hard time because her stepchild didn't like her, and she hadn't been able to have a child of her own. One day, Man Ni noticed that Mrs. Li was wearing a limited edition bracelet that Man Ni had recently sold. At the horse riding school, Man Ni also saw how Mrs. Li was ignored by her stepchild, even though she clearly cared about them. When Jing Wei told Huan Shan that Man Ni had forced him to take horse riding lessons, Huan Shan got upset. Man Ni explained that one of the women in the group had both her children studying at Oxford because she invested in their education early on. Man Ni insisted that they needed to focus more on Jing Wei's future and make more money to give him the best opportunities. Huan Shan didn't seem too happy. That night, Xing invited Gu Jia out again and took her to a fancy restaurant. He didn't need a reservation, but slipped money to the waiter to get a window seat. Xing seemed like a VIP because even the chef came out to greet him, which impressed Gu Jia. During dinner, Xing opened up and shared that he had been financially independent for some time, even though he was only 37 years old. Now, he spent his time traveling the world and looking for exciting experiences. He suggested that Gu Jia join him on his next adventure. As a thank you, Gu Jia cooked a simple dish of tomatoes and eggs for Xing, and in return, Xing gave her the bracelet she had noticed earlier. Meanwhile, things weren't going well for Xiao Yang at the TV station. He was worried about losing his job and had to work late, breaking his promise to stay home with Xiao Qin. At that moment, Xiao Qin was furious, feeling like Xiao Yang didn't care about her or the baby they lost. She began to regret marrying him, while her mom defended him, saying he was talented and ambitious. Xiao Qin's mom insisted that having a husband was important for a woman's life, which only made Xiao Qin angrier. Later that afternoon, Xiao Yang came home and found his aquarium unplugged. It turned out her mom had unplugged it for 2 hours to save electricity, but forgot to plug it back in, causing some of the fish to die. Xiao Yang was really angry. Even Xiao Qin's mom was upset with him, saying they were just fish, and pointing out how he didn't show any emotion when he and Xiao Qin lost their baby. To make things worse, Xiao Qin's mom cooked fish for dinner, and it's not from the aquarium, but Xiao Yang couldn't handle it and stormed out. Shortly after, Xiao Qin ran after Xiao Yang as he went to bury the fish. She was mad that Xiao Yang seemed to care more about the fish than her. Xiao Yang snapped back, saying he preferred working all day rather than being at home, where Xiao Qin's mom constantly nagged him. Hearing this, Xiao Qin's mom was deeply hurt and decided to leave that night. Confused and upset, Xiao Qin went to Man Ni's house for comfort. Man Ni took care of her, especially since she had the flu. Feeling neglected by Xiao Yang, Xiao Qin grew more emotional, but Man Ni gently comforted her and invited her to stay the night. Meanwhile, Gu Jia and Xing attended the captain's dinner on the cruise, where there was a raffle with the prize of having a wish granted. Xing won the raffle, and his wish was for Gu Jia to sing on stage. Even though her singing wasn't great and made the audience laugh, Xing looked fascinated by her. Afterward, Gu Jia joked that Xing must have bribed the captain to win, but Xing insisted it was pure luck and sincerity. He then expressed his feelings for Gu Jia and tried to get closer to her. But Gu Jia felt overwhelmed and used the excuse of being tired to return to her room. The next morning, Xiao Yang went to Man Ni's house to pick up Xiao Qin. Man Ni had a serious conversation with Xiao Yang, reminding him to be more understanding and supportive of Xiao Qin, especially since she was heartbroken after losing their baby and really wanted to be a mother. Soon after, Xiao Yang took Xiao Qin out for breakfast and apologized for being insensitive, but Xiao Qin pointed out that their problems were deeper than that. She admitted that losing the baby made her realize how little they truly understood each other. She felt like their love had faded compared to when they first fell in love, but Xiao Yang disagreed, saying Xiao Qin was overthinking it. At the horse riding school, Mrs. Li's stepchild purposely pushed their horse toward Mrs. Li, causing her to fall. But then, Man Ni quickly helped her and started a conversation. Impressed by Man Ni's words, Mrs. Li opened up about her struggles. Man Ni suggested that Mrs. Li try to bond with her stepchild as a friend first, instead of forcing a motherly connection too quickly. On the last night of the cruise, Xing stopped by Gu Jia's room and invited her to go to Iceland with him to see the Northern Lights. Gu Jia declined, explaining that they came from two different worlds and that once the trip was over, she would return to her simple life and daily routine. There, Xing asked if they could at least exchange contact information, but Gu Jia said no and wished him goodbye. When Gu Jia returned home, she was surprised to find her landlord with a real estate agent. The landlord planned to sell the house Gu Jia had been renting to help pay for his daughter's wedding. Still shocked by the news, Gu Jia got a call from Man Ni, who told her that Xiao Qin had a miscarriage. Without hesitation, Gu Jia dropped everything to meet up with Man Ni and visit Xiao Qin. At that time, Man Ni and Gu Jia teamed up to cheer Xiao Qin up, suggesting a fun day to lift her spirits. But Xiao Qin refused, saying she wasn't in the mood. Then, Man Ni had another idea. They visited the university where she and Xiao Qin had studied, sneaking into a class and pretending to be students again. Watching the students, they reminisced about their younger selves from 10 years ago. Xiao Qin used the moment to vent her feelings about her husband, and they laughed so hard that the professor kicked them out of the class. After their fun day together, reality hit them again. When Man Ni got home, she found out that her father had visited Jing Wei while she was out. Gu Jia now faced the challenge of finding a new place to live, while Xiao Qin asked Xiao Yang to get his fertility checked. She didn't want to experience the heartbreak of losing another baby without understanding why. Xiao Qin even sent the test results to her mom, which made Xiao Yang angry because he felt his privacy had been invaded. Luckily, Xiao Yang's fertility results were fine, easing some of the tension between them. That night, Xiao Yang told Xiao Qin that maybe it wasn't their relationship that was falling apart, but they were just getting older, making life feel more boring compared to when they were younger. Xiao Qin then helped Gu Jia pack her things. Gu Jia felt a little sad about leaving her old place, especially since it was close to her job and had a nice city view. Her new place was more than an hour away by subway, but Gu Jia was determined to save money and planned to use her savings to travel once a year. That night, Man Ni had a nightmare about her father having a stroke. Panicked, she called him to check, but he was asleep and grumpily hung up. The next morning, Man Ni visited her father and told him that living alone made her worry. She gave him 3 options: let her install a security camera, hire a helper, or move in with her and Huan Shan. But her father refused all the options. Still, Man Ni noticed a brochure for a retirement home on his desk, which upset her. Her father insisted that he didn't want to be a burden on her. Soon after, Man Ni and Huan Shan took her father to visit a retirement home, but Man Ni wasn't happy with the quality and didn't like the idea. They visited a fancier retirement home recommended by Huan Shan, but the high cost made her father uncomfortable with him paying for it. Their son, Jing Wei, also expressed concern for his grandfather, which softened her father's attitude a bit. After feeling unappreciated at work, Xiao Yang decided to take time off to be with Xiao Qin. Ironically, Xiao Qin now wanted to return to work. Meanwhile, Mrs. Li happily told Man Ni that, thanks to her advice, her relationship with her stepchild had improved, though the child still acted a bit rude. Mrs. Li also mentioned Man Ni's company to her husband, and he agreed to meet them at the golf course. Shortly after, Huan Shan and Man Ni met with Mrs. Li, who casually told Huan Shan to send the documents, and the deal would be finalized. Huan Shan was surprised at how easy it all seemed. He was impressed by how Man Ni secured such a big business deal and asked her to return to the company full-time to help him. However, Man Ni preferred to stay involved with the rich mom's circle, believing the connections would bring more opportunities. At that time, Huan Shan wasn't happy, thinking those women were snobby and could have a bad influence on Man Ni, but she insisted it was the only way to improve their lifestyle. The next day at Mill, Xing suddenly showed up, surprising Gu Jia. He told her that he had just been in Iceland for a few days, but couldn't stop thinking about her. There, Xing admitted that while he was in Iceland, he asked a travel agent for information to find out where Gu Jia worked. Before leaving, Xing slipped his hotel key card into Gu Jia's pocket. Gu Jia felt excited and asked her manager for the afternoon off. She rushed to Xing's hotel, and just as she was about to use the key card, Xing opened the door, looking at her with longing. They hugged and kissed passionately. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is when in doubt, buy a $40,000 bag, blame the fish, and if a rich guy randomly shows up from Iceland, maybe just take a nap instead.